Welcome, everyone. We're here today with Thomas Hübl, the founder of the Practice of Global Social Witnessing, to learn more about the skills, the impact, the basic competencies that we need for global social witnessing. And we define global social witnessing as a social intervention technology where we cultivate our human capacity to mindfully attend to global events with an embodied awareness, thereby creating an inner world space that mirrors and brings compassion to the outer world space. Many of us might come to this not with a rich background of experience in global social witnessing. And for that reason, I would love to ask you, Thomas, to both share about the basic competencies that we might want to develop within us as we start into the practice, and also the best ways that we could start practicing global social witnessing in our environments.
Yeah, first of all, global social witnessing sounds a bit bombastic for what it actually is. So what it is actually very simple. It's tracking my own inner experience and responses given any outside circumstances that I'm experiencing. But for our practice, when we do global social witnessing, we are focusing mainly on events that happen in our society in order to see what's the level of intimacy and closeness with events and what's the level of difficulty or challenge when I experience something that's challenging in society or even traumatizing around me in my city where I live, in the country where I live, in the world, when I read something on the news. So how my physical, emotional, mental, relational response looks like. Because what I'm saying often is that the amount of absence and difficulty in experiencing difficult situations, challenging situations, is exactly the absence of the collective trauma field that we all have been born into. So in a way, it has two functions. It has the function of me having a training and a practice, a relational practice to be a citizen in the country, in the environment, in the community where I live. And at the same time, it helps us to make the invisible aspect, the absence of trauma that is unconscious, and turn it a bit more into visibility. And that means, for example, practically speaking, so there is a difficult event like a school shooting in the US. And it's a traumatizing event that I think many of us can read as news, and it might trigger maybe our own trauma, but it's very hard to find a deeper relationship to such a difficult event. And relationship means that I have a felt experience of the extent of such a moment in life. And so we might see that we feel a bit tight in our bodies. We might feel that we need to distance ourselves from the intensity of what that means. I might feel that I'm completely indifferent, it's nothing to do with me. It's there, it happens there. It's not my life. So, or I'm overactivated. I'm very stressed out. I get very scared that this could happen to me too. And I go into the hyperactivation of trauma. But in between is like a fracture or fragmentation. So then either I'm more on the indifferent side or I'm more on the activated side. But all of that is not yet a felt relationship. Sometimes we see more difficult events and we are able to stay present to that and really feel what the event really means and what it means in us. And that's a different level of compassion, that's a different level of citizen engagement, that's a different level of holding a social awareness. And the reason for practicing global social witnessing is also that the collective body, like we as citizens, we as a collective, hold a higher awareness of all the processes that happen within our communities, cities, collective, so that the collective body becomes more aware of itself. Because there is a lot of unconsciousness and unconscious processes happening in the collective field. And every one of us has a share. And so what we wanna look into is what are the practices that every one of us can do that are simple enough so that we can apply it every day, that are simple enough but strong enough to help us to realize something, and that have a transformational potential for us as individuals, but also, if many people do that, for us as a society. So to make the invisible, absent, traumatized part more visible and give us a chance to integrate it and become more whole, and also have more capacity to host the world in us. And that is actually a very, very important antidote to our polarization that we see right now in many places around the world, the many different fractures that appear when the stress level goes up on the planet. And so I think that that's a very powerful practice, even though at first it sounds very simple or abstract.
Thank you, Thomas. That was wonderful. And to be even more concrete, if I'm, say, a school teacher and I'm teaching 17-year-olds and I would like to bring a regular weekly practice to my class, where would you advise me to start? How would you advise me to start?
Yeah, of course, when we talk about education and schools, we will, of course, choose as teachers or parents, we will choose things that are appropriate for the age of the classes. And we will say, okay, let's, besides learning intellectually and cognitively about life, let's see what's our experiential learning directly from life. These are two different things. I can learn about a certain part of history, about a certain part of our population, or I can have that knowledge, but also focus on what's actually my real experience. And I think that's very important, because often othering in our society starts from an inner feeling that is a result of our collective past. So let's say if in colonialism or racism, there is a lot of painful past. It shows up in us when we are not really aware. It shows up like as a distance. Oh, that's a stranger. I don't know if I can trust that stranger. It feels unfamiliar. It feels a bit distant. And so even if that's not very strong, but it might be also very strong. So there's a whole range of intensity. If I'm not aware that I'm experiencing this, I might think that's how I feel. That's normal. Versus, oh, that surfaces part, not just the two people that meet, also the past that the two people that meet, the root system basically carries. And that shows up as something. So then I'm a little bit more careful, I'm a little bit more distant. Then I'm with other people that feel more familiar to me. And that already creates a difference in how the relationship might evolve. And if that happens millions of times in our society, so that creates a societal dynamic. And so in schools, we can learn about racism, for example, or inequality, or we can learn about colonialism or other aspects in our society, the left versus the right. Or I can look at, okay, what's my experience when we talk about that? How do I really feel in my body? Do I feel relaxed, stressed, tense, open, numb? What's my emotional relation? Am I a bit scared? Am I a bit hesitant? Do I feel warm and open? What are my concepts that I have carrying myself? what have I learned about that, and did I really look if that's really true? Or maybe I just collected conditioning on the way to my maturation and maturity. And so that we, as teachers, can also bring in experiential learning, like inner learning, and facts learning, like knowledge, and combine it. And I think that helps us not only to transcend and look through certain old conditionings, belief systems, separations, polarizations in our society, and build something new, especially with the next generation. But it also helps us to raise our level of awareness and build new relationships, because the reverse of trauma and absence and activation or wounding is relational health. And we all know how important relational health is. I think even relational health is the continuation of our immune system. Everybody has an immune system. The healthier is our relational ecosystem that we are part of, all the relations that we live in our life, the more we take care that they are healthy, honest, intimate, clear, present, connected, the healthier we will be. Because that affects us all the time. We all know when there are toxic relationships, when there are arguments or conflicts all the time, it really has an emotional effect on us. Our stress level is different. We feel less comfortable. We need to distance ourselves from people. All of that has an impact. And let's say that didn't start just with us. That distancing, turning away, all those things, we were born into a world that did that already for thousands of years. So it's not that we are starting here and we are this white sheet of paper and we're just starting from scratch. No, we carry already a certain aversion, a certain distancing, a certain connectivity and absence in us. And I think, especially as a school teacher, we have amazing possibilities to introduce mindfulness-based or awareness-based practices or system sensing into the way we teach. And that helps us to transcend also old belief systems and not stay stuck in those and perpetuate those. Because some of those are being perpetuated just unconsciously. And I think that there is a lot to do, especially in the transgenerational transmission, that the update of the next generation is really an update. And I think that will make our world definitely a more conscious and a more connected place.
Absolutely. And whether it's like school teachers or any of us who would like to bring a practice like this to our organizations, our NGOs, adult learning, universities, I think it's a brilliant medicine, you could say, in a world that would love to care more and often doesn't quite know how to find the way. So before we continue from this question around the practical first steps, I just wonder whether you would like to say more about the 5 minutes a week or 5 minutes a day, but let's say 5 minutes a week practice.
Yeah, first I want to come back to, because you said a very important sentence, we want to create more caring, more engagement, more self-motivated activity to be part of our society. We want that and we need it in democratic processes that are honest and clear and open and really fair for everybody. We need also to be engaged. I cannot just ask for what I need or what I want from democracy. I also need to see, what do I give? What's my contribution? I'm not just on the receiving end of democracy. I'm also the co-creator of democracy. And often we forget that because we feel a bit disempowered or we feel we are lacking agency. But every one of us has agency. There's no democracy out there. We are all democracy. So we are creating it. And I think everything that we hold back is also creating it. And that's why I think that engagement, creating care, is a way to create, or care arises out of connectedness, out of the capacity to host other people, groups that we disagree with, other political orientations, other cultural or ethnicities, and learn to explore ourselves. Who am I in relation to that? Not just intellectually, because of course we all have learned a lot and we all trained a lot intellectually and we accumulated a lot of knowledge, but care, for example, and contribution are not just intellectual traits. That's an experiential capacity, that's an emotional capacity, that's an embodied capacity. And that's why I think if you want to create a world, as you spoke about now, then the experiential part is very important, especially in learning institutions. And not just the learning about, it's also what's my relationship to what I'm learning. And that makes me a creative free thinker. And many organizations nowadays are looking for how can we hire people, like the talent is who are creative thinkers that can think out of the box, that have their own creative agency going. Yeah, but we also need to see how do we create environments where we free ourselves to be creative thinkers and to be unique and to be kind of innovative enough and creative enough. And we can do that when we are kind of buried under many old belief systems. That doesn't create a lot of creativity and innovation. And the other question, 5 minutes a day or a week, is also, okay, let's see that we can have our personal practice, awareness practice that everybody practices, and this can be body-based practices on yoga, tai chi, doing our physical exercise. It can be contemplative and meditative practices that we do for ourselves. But we said, okay, let's invest a part of our daily practice as a social awareness process, which means I choose one news feed, whatever I feel okay with that day, and I sit with it. I sit down, I listen to my inner, I feel my body, I see how do I feel emotionally, what's my inner experience. And then I begin to connect to any kind of event. I heard something about politics, something happened in the neighborhood, I don't know, something happened in the country or somewhere else on the other side of the planet. It doesn't really matter because we are one living system. And then I sit and I say, okay, how does this affect me? Who am I in relation to that event, fact, whatever, situation? And I look, what does that mean on the level of my body? What does that mean on the level of my emotions? What's my stress level that activates in me? Do I feel relaxed, stressed, tight, open, loving, scared, angry? And then what are the mental processes that are happening in me in relation to that? And do I feel intimate and close, or do I feel a bit withdrawn and distant? And I think if we take just these 4 elements, my body and stress level, my emotional experience, my thought patterns and belief systems that I'm holding, and my relational experience, then I besides only reading the news and kind of storing that intellectually, I practice to be a system sensing citizen. And as a system sensing citizen, I'm not just a mental machine. I am a human being with a deep human experience. And we often say the word information. But information in a human system, in a human biocomputer, is in form. It goes in and creates a form. So we all create forms in ourselves. When we look at the tree, we have the tree informs me. So I have a tree inside. This tree that I see is not the tree out there, is the tree out there in my sense perception. So the tree informs me, has a kind of an information agency. When we meet other people, we live in each other. We arise in each other. That's information. And sometimes, especially when we see things as difficult, we will feel, oh, the information doesn't go far inside. It stops somewhere because it's either scary, threatening, disturbing, and or stressful. So we stop the information flow. And that's when we are part of these relational moments. And this is where we are part of potential re-traumatization, or re-traumatization happens not only through the things that we do, it happens also sometimes through the things that we don't do because we don't feel. It's both. And that's why 5 minutes can be, it's a short enough time that we can include it in our practice. I can do it once a week, I can do it every day or a few times a week. But I introduce systems, sensing, and awareness-based social practices in my own practice, which is a special muscle. It's different than I meditate on silence, for example, or I meditate and I feel my body. This is a kind of a different aspect and a different capacity that it trains. And I think that's a fantastic skill building tool. It sounds very simple, but for example, if I'm working in a company, if I'm leading a team, if I'm running a company or an NGO, an organization, my system sensing capacity is extremely important. But it's so much undervalued at the moment in our society because a lot of things go through balance sheets and projections and financial projections and kind of organigrams. And so that part, anyway, we developed a lot, but that holistic, systemic understanding, that's, I think, the next level. And because it includes our intuition, it includes our emotional connectivity, emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is not that I can think well about emotions. Emotional intelligence, that I have a fluid spectrum. I'm at home in my own emotional experience. That's why I feel your emotional experience and I can connect to it, host it, be part of it. And that creates togetherness. And togetherness creates a feeling of generosity. When somebody has an issue or is triggered by something and somebody else listens presently with an emotional resonance, not just giving advice, mental ideas, the person will feel safe, will feel heard, will be able to open up, to relax, and to find new solutions together. And I think that's why information, the deeper information can go in, the wiser will be the response. But that's something we need to work on. That's not just given because, as I said before, we haven't been born into a world that is just healthy and great and open and wise. And we are the continuation of that. We are often also the continuation of many other very painful aspects of humanity's past. And that's why we need to do some inner work to acquire wisdom in our life.
Yeah, beautifully described. And we can already see how this tool can lead us, as you say, to become system sensing citizens and also to help overcome fields of polarization within society and fragmentation, so that it's a very valuable and precious tool for anyone who's trying to run a company or an organization or a school community or a whole society. One place that I would like to have a bit more clarity is this distinction between activation and relatedness. Because for some of us, when we really start feeling the world, I remember you also saying this once, when people start crying at the realization of what is really happening on the planet at this time, that it is actually more of a question, why not more of us are crying at times about the state of the world and the experiences that both nature and people are having at the moment. And at the same time, in many of our cultures, crying is already seen as a form of emotional over-responsiveness or activation. So how do we also, as we lead groups and others, teenagers, into these spaces, how do we support a healthy distinction between overactivation and an emotional expression that comes naturally as an expression of relatedness?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. That's also a bit complex to answer, but let's try to come closer to the question. Because the example you brought is very true, because when we are open and caring, we also feel more. And we feel more, we can enjoy life more, because we feel more the pleasure, the beauty, the truth, the composition of life. When you feel a lot, you experience music differently, you experience art differently, you experience nature differently, you experience yourself differently. It's like everything becomes richer. And that's great. And we also need to know that everything will be more amplified or richer or more in detail. That means also when we see something terrible that happens in the world, like a crime or a shooting or a war, that also gets deeper into us. And I think in a titrated way, the opening of in a titrated, related way, like in an appropriate way, because we also can just overwhelm ourselves, and there's no good in doing that. But if I grow my maturity to...
Maybe just explain titrated way.
Yeah.
Some people might not know the word.
Titrated ways that I come closer to that experience step by step, and not just all at once, so that I see how far can I go. Maybe I need to take a step back, then I take another step, and I feel, and I go slowly. It's not just I need to open up to everything, because that means wisdom. That's not at all what I'm saying. And I'm saying that as my maturity grows, what for me a definition of maturity is that I can stay related to 360 degrees of my life more and more. And I believe that's also a deep function of resilience. And that's a function of like being a mature citizen. Sometimes we disconnect and say, no, if this happens, I don't want this, and I turn away. No, it's uncomfortable that that's happening now. And I'm in relation to what that discomfort means, and I stay there. I stay present to that, because I know sometimes in life things will feel uncomfortable, and that feels uncomfortable to me, but that doesn't mean that I turn away. I stay a related citizen. I stay a related intimate partner. I stay. And I'm not talking about criminal situations or like heavily traumatizing situations. I'm talking about daily life situations that I often might not agree with somebody. That doesn't mean that I need to turn away from that person or from their political orientation. I can stay engaged. And that engagement might become like a mutual developmental process. And that also means that when we like grow, we on the one hand feel more, but through the integration process that maturation means when I need to integrate my past wounds and maybe the wounds of my culture that I grew up in step by step. So that integrated means that something that has been split off and put into our conscious will slowly we become aware of it and integrate it, which means integration is learning. I grow. So every time I integrate a part of myself, I grow. I learn something. I become wiser, more mature, and so on. And I create the capacity to stay related to more situations in my life. But when we get triggered, coming back to the activation, then it's different, because when I get triggered, I also feel a lot, but what I feel is my own past, is my own wounding. So I see in a traumatizing experience somewhere in society or read it on the news. But what I feel is maybe a lot of stress that comes up. I feel suddenly tight, or my heart feels tight. I feel scared, or I feel numb and indifferent, and say, oh, what does this have to do with me? It's nothing to do with me, it's their life. So the dichotomy of these two different inner trauma states, I think, is something that we need to learn to first witness in ourselves, then maybe work on this through our own awareness with somebody, through sharing, through creating an environment to be able to examine those inner states together. And then more and more I can discern, oh, now I'm getting really stressed. And when I'm getting stressed, I'm coming more and more into fight and flight, or I freeze. And when I'm more relaxed, when I digest life, so when, for example, after work, when we can relax, sometimes we think about the day, we are digesting the day. Sometimes when we go to sleep, during our sleep, we are digesting. And digesting leads to integrating, which means learning. And so when I'm in a more regulated state, and not so in fight and flight, either scared or I become aggressive, so then I am more open and related. Steve Porges, in the polyvagal theory, calls this the social engagement zone. So when my nervous system is relaxed and regulated enough that I can be related to you, and I can also be a partner for you when you feel stressed, or you are a partner for me when I get triggered and stressed. So noticing my inner triggers and also allowing myself to be triggered. That's not a bad thing. That's part of who I am. But to create more of a space to host it, more awareness, also more relational networks that feel positive in such moments to me, resourcing, giving me energy, support, listening to me. All these are very beneficial aspects. And then in my regulated self, I have a natural emotional response. In my triggered self, I have a pre-programmed, exaggerated emotional response. And that difference is important. And I think the complexity in it is that we sometimes, when we are in it, we don't know exactly what it is. And so we need sometimes references, and we need reflections from outside to learn about our inner states, because once we are triggered, we see less. So that's why I said it's complex, because sometimes we might mix those things.
Yeah, it's complex and also very beautiful, because I'm understanding now that there is an additional healing aspect of global social witnessing practice where we can relate to each other's emotional responses. Because we also see that many people stay so isolated with their maybe natural emotional responses that also because of that they become pre-programmed, because of the isolation around it. When we see young people move from grief about the world into depression, that is a process also of non-relatedness in the social sphere. So it's very encouraging, I feel, what we are speaking about here. And you already said two very beautiful things about the impact that global social witnessing has on our societies, on our collective bodies. You said that the collective body becomes more aware of itself. And that's not a small process, that's a big process. And also you said the deeper the information goes in, the wiser will be the response. And that's of the individual, but also the collective. So I would love to ask you to build on that, to expand on how global social witnessing is not just, is impactful on a societal level.
Yeah, because global social witnessing is really like a technology. It's a consciousness technology. It seems like a simple practice, but actually, if we practice it and more people practice that, then there is kind of an upward spiraling of awareness within the social body. And I believe a lot of what we can call social pathologies or very difficult social processes that we really struggle with as societies are living in the unconscious aspect of the society. So when the society starts to create more awareness, we integrate more of that unconscious material. So the whole society starts to grow and learn. So the collective intelligence not only gets de-iced, which means from a frozen state into a liquid state, it gets integrated, and integrating is post-traumatic learning. Every time we integrate something, an individual, an organization, a culture, humanity gets wiser. And so we have a higher capacity to be informed, which is a higher capacity to respond. And there can be a very triggered response that will just create more pain and more trauma. And there can be a very wise response that will create more unification and more solutions, more creative potential. And this can be in the same situation, depends whom it meets. And that's why we want to upgrade slowly, not only individual competencies, but we want to do this as collectives in order to upgrade the collective capacity to deal with polarization, to deal with scarcity in society, to deal with all the discord and all the tensions that we see at the moment arising. And I think if we want to respond to climate change, for example, or to a war situation like in Ukraine, Russia, we need a higher social responsiveness. Every upgrade of responsiveness means an upgrade of collective intelligence and changes the outcome of how we respond and which kind of solutions we will come up with. What's our creativity, the level of innovation, the level of flexibility, the level of hosting uncertainty, the level of being able to change fast. So all of that is growing. And that's why the upward spiral is I practice, we practice, the social body creates more awareness. More awareness means deeper information. If more and more people get deeper informed, more wiser responses will lead us, and we will more and more answer from sense making. What is sense making? Sense making is cognition paired with emotional and physical sensing. So sense making means my thinking, my emotional and physical sensing are not three different things, but one nervous system flow. It's one flow through my central nervous system. And the more people can respond from that sense-making integration, that's collective wisdom. And so that's why they are inherently connected, because the more I am informed, millions of years of life are listening. Because we are not just these separate bodies, we are part of a much bigger context of life. And all of that context is encoded in our bodies. We didn't develop livers, we didn't develop emotions, we didn't develop all of that. That has been already handed over to us. So we were born into that. And that's part of a huge chain of life after life after life after life. Life developed this amazing biocomputer and all the functions in it, and the complexity of societies that we are able to live in. And that complexity, if all the wisdom of our ancestors is listening to each other, we are actually co-creating a world consciously. If only part of us listens, another part doesn't. And that also has an effect. And if that's millions or billions of people doing, that's a huge effect. And that's why I think that awareness-based system sensing or global social witnessing information practices sense making, all of that are very, very important components to upgrade the resilience, the collective intelligence, the collective wisdom, our collective responsiveness. And I think that's what this time calls us for, through innovation like technology and through difficulties like the climate change. Life says collective intelligence needs to go up. And I think that's the calling.
Beautiful. I remember a situation that we had in a process that we had in Germany, overcoming polarization and democracy, where one of our participants was courageous enough to speak directly to the fear and withdrawal she felt in the face of refugees from Ukraine coming in. And then as you were working with this person, it became apparent that it was falling on the experience of, in her family line, of being refugees after the Second World War themselves. So that actually it came from a place of great closeness and resonance with the experience, but it led to a distancing. And just as an example of how this kind of work can lead to a deeper respect for the experience that each person in democracy is bringing from the past, that no one needs to be shut down, but that in a way it's just a part of listening more deeply to unleash the collective intelligence that is hidden within the system. And you described it beautifully just now.
Yeah, that's beautiful what you said. And also that we see that often we pathologize processes, or we say, no, that's not right, or you're not right, or I'm not right, or like it's wrong how I feel. But actually, when I examine it deeper, this examining my experience deeper and finding a deeper intimacy, and also being willing to examine your experience deeper and be more of a partner in your inner experience, even if it's sometimes not comfortable. But these are very powerful transformational tools. And I think that this leads way more to intimacy. And I see, wow, yeah, the fear of refugees is actually in the lineage of the example that you brought, is actually I'm creating a distance because I'm scared. And then I find out, wow, my grandparents were also refugees. And that's why that experience is really hard for me. And I don't want to feel that fear that is in my ancestors. And that's why I kind of don't want to come close and expose myself. And I don't have to expose myself. What is very beneficial is to notice, oh, I'm turning away from a part of myself. I'm turning away when I close off the reality outside. I often close certain parts of myself. And I think the more I get that correlation, I start to grow a lot, because then all the difficulties in my life that I meet in my daily experience are also invitations to grow and learn. And I think that's something that for many of us is challenging to go deeper into, because we always find a challenge when we say, no, but this is not that. And as I said, I'm not talking about now criminal situations or violent situations. We have even disagreements with certain people, or hearing certain political opinions can be very challenging.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Thomas. I think this was very helpful, and we will continue to develop this work and bring it out into the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your passion. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Thank you.